let's begin and daven that the zchut of our learning should help to bring home all of the rest of the hostages, protect our soldiers and Am Yisrael, all of the innocents, and bring a speedy end to our war. Be also an Ilui Neshama for my mother, Shama Leah Bas, Nafa Mendel Rachel, and also my father, whose Yortzeit was a couple of days ago, Binyamin Yitzchak, Ben Chaim Shmuel, Bella. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It happens sometimes. All right, let's go into it from here. Let me share the screen. Participants can now see my screen. At least that's what it says. There we go. All right. Yeah, so unfortunately, I think we'll have to go with this, but this is not bad because it also has Nikud, which will be helpful. So we were looking at these series of Gemaras that talk about bulmus and what you do if you get bulmus. And we got up to this story, which I read for you very quickly, and now we're going to read it and try to understand it a little bit better. So let's see. Paul, you were here first. You got to start reading. Amar, from here.
Rav, wait,
Yeah.
something happened. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel, Mi she'achazu bulmus, ma'achilin oto.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That's one back behind where I wanted to be. Hold on a second. That's what we did last time. We want to start from here. From Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yossi.
Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Yosei, Havo ka'azli be'orcha achzei bulmus, לרבי יהודה כפרי לרועה אכלי לריפתה אמר לי רבי יוסי קיפחת את הרועה כי...
Stop there.
Okay.
Stop there. Wait, let me just check. It's easy to see. That's what the reason I like to do with my sheets. Can you hear me?
No, you are there, but
yeah, I hear you.
Okay.
Really, the screen went.
Something happened. I don't know what to do. All right, again. I'm sorry, I'm get distracted because it's just here. Here we have the.
That's what I read.
Yeah, this is what it's easier to read this here because of the nikud, but on the other hand, it doesn't break up the sentences, which is what I do on my sheets. So we'll do the best we can. So okay, so what did we read? Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yossi, Havu ka'azli ba'orcha. Okay, what does that mean? Havu ka'azli ba'orcha. I'm forcing everybody to brush up on your Aramaic skills.
They were going on the way.
They were going on the way, right? So they're right. Havu is ayu. Ka, which we've come across many times before, is a word that itself doesn't mean anything. And you can look it up in Jastra. He has a little bit of a grammatical explanation, but it's a word that's inserted in speech. I think it like I think whatever it's something in Aramaic, it makes it flow a little bit easier with the kain, and I'm just going to leave it at that. All right. So, don't worry about ka'azli. All right, they were going ba'orcha on the way, right? Achzei bulmus Rabbi Yehuda. I assume everybody knows what that means. Achzei, right, is like achazo bulmus Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda was uh, stricken by bulmus. Kapche leroe, achle lerifta. So this is a little more obscure. Kapche leroe. What does it mean he was kapeach leroe? So Rashi explains, kfa'o v'natal kikaro himenu. He forced him, or he overcame him. He forced him, and he took his kikar, he took his loaf of bread from him. Achle l'rifta. He ate his rifta. You know what rifta means? Rashi just alluded to this.
What is ba'ain?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't translate that. I thought everybody would know. But roe, you know what a roe is, like a roe song.
Roed son, I mean, but I don't know what it means in Aramaic.
So first of all, I think a lot of words are the same or nearly the same, and sometimes there's there's a mixture of Hebrew and Aramaic, but I think I think in I think it is slightly different in Aramaic, ra'i maybe instead of roe, but so he forced a shepherd, or he overcame a shepherd. So they were, in other words, they're walking out somewhere. And apparently it was a long walk. Excuse me. So when they were out, on the way, Rabbi Yehuda was overcome by bulmus. And so he knew he had to eat. So
he found the shepherd and forced him to give him his bread.
Forced him to give him his bread, and he ate his bread.
That sounds strange.
Okay, so let's say it out. So why is that strange?
Well, it sounds a bit like a mugging.
Yes.
Yes, it sounds like he's robbing this roe.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in a moment. But even if you say that, that the roe agreed to give him bread, which it doesn't say, but let's say that's true. Nonetheless, it's difficult. This word kipeach, kipeach, it doesn't usually mean that as such, but here in the PL form, Jastrow actually quotes our Gemara here. So Jastrow explains kafach, which is the pile form, means to arch or to bend, but it can also then mean to slap or to strike. And kipeach is PL form in Hebrew, and he says it can mean the same, or it can mean to bend, to force, to outrage, to overwhelm. So we have he also quotes this Gemara, Kadosh Baruch Hu Eino Mekapech Sachar Kol Bria, I think is what it is. Kadosh Baruch Hu does not outrage. This is the way he translates that, by withholding, is by implication. It means Mekapech. So, because Mekapech Schar has this implication of withholding, that you're holding back something. So the way Jastrow understands it is that it really means to outrage by withholding. So here I'm going to skip down, and here this is kafach is if you ever use Jastrow, but so ch means Chaldaic, which is Aramaic. So this is the Aramaic form kafach, and he actually quotes our Gemara here. Kiper, right? He overpowered the shepherd and ate his bread. So that's what it means. In any event, yeah. So it is. It's a strange thing, and so until now, in the Gemara, we had different rabbanim who were saying, and they were Amoraim. They were telling you what to do if you have bulmus, right? That you have to. We start off by saying, you feed somebody something sweet, and then we qualified that by saying you have to actually give food first and then give them something sweet. Or we had different foods that you feed the person along with honey, right? Like the fatty tail of the sheep, which, by the way, I looked that up in, I did some kind of an internet search, and the term aliyah appears. I think it turns out it's also Arabic, and it's widely known as a delicacy is to eat the tail of the sheep, and there are different ways of preparing it. But I know, we know it from the Gemara that the aliyah was something that was edible. People ate. In any event, but so until now, the Gemara has been prescriptive. It's telling us this is what you do if you have bulmus, or you're confronted with somebody who has bulmus. You have to feed them, and maybe you'll feed them food, and you'll feed them something sweet. And we talked about how I think it was Rabbi Yochanan, right, just before this, who had bulmus, and he went out of his way to eat the figs that grew on the eastern side of the tree. I had one more thought about that, why the eastern side and not any other side, right? Because he learns it from the pasuk Mimeget Tuot Shamesh, from the delicacies of the produce of the sun, is the literal translation. That's the pasuk. It's like the proof text of why you should eat from the east. And so we said, right, so it sounds like you eat from the east because it gets this exposure to the sun. But then we said, okay, but the whole tree gets exposure to the sun. So one other thought I had is simply that it's true that ultimately the whole tree will get exposure to the sun during the day, but on any given day, the eastern since the eastern side of the tree was first, so if you got there in the morning, so of course that will be the sweeter side. But even if you got there later in the day, it would also be the sweeter side. So it will take till the end of the day for the western side of the tree to get as much sun as the eastern side of the tree already got. So make of that what you will. But now we have this story. So Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, until now we have these prescriptive things in the Gemara from Amoraim, and now we bring this story about Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, who of course are Tanaim, and it's not really prescriptive in the same way. It's telling.
It's an Agadah. It's an Agadah.
an Agadah. In other words, this is an Agadah that apparently, so some Agadot are completely fanciful, right?
Mhm.
But this Agadah is apparently a story that really happened. It sounds like a story that actually happened.
Mhm.
And so it's telling us it's not immediately prescriptive in the same way, because if it were, then it would be telling us that, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, even if you would have to essentially mug somebody, like Michael Werner said, that you have to mug somebody. They say your name and you pop up um, to get your food, but whatever. But also notice, so he ate what he could, which was rifta. He ate bread. He didn't. Maybe he wasn't in a position to get something sweet. Lo yodea. But it's telling it indicates to us apparently how dire uh, bulmus can be, right? That we go to such great lengths. I'll tell you a little bit more about the halachic implications in a moment, but let's go on. So Amarle Rabbi Yossi, so Rabbi Yossi said to Rabbi Yehuda, Pachta et Toroeh, you overcame this roeh, like as if he's like exclaiming, look at what you did. And Rabbi Yehuda doesn't reply to him. Right? That's the end of this part of the story. So, Michael Werner, you can continue reading.
Kimito, limita, achze, abomus, le Rabbi Yosef. Adruhu, lage, Betzae, Amarle Rabbi Yehuda, Ani kapachti, et haroe, veta kapachta et ha'ir kula.
Okay, so what does all this mean? Ki mito lemata.
I don't have the slightest idea.
Okay, anybody?
When he arrived to the town.
Yes, when you arrive to the town, mata is town, mato means to reach or to, in this case, to arrive at. So when they came to town, achze bulmus Rabbi Yossi.
Rabbi Yossi was seized by Bomos.
Okay, then what happened? Hadruhu belage vitzae. So this is a little more obscure. So let's look at Rashi. Hadruhu belage vitzae sivavuhu b'nei ha'ir v'hikifuhu l'ginin shel dvash u'mitika u'ka'arot shel tavshilin. So the word adruhu, the root is hadar, which is like chazar in Hebrew, and it in this case hachziruhu, meaning they turned it around. They turned around, or they went around him, and that's what Rashi explains. Sivabuhu. The people of the city surrounded him, and with and they put around him the ginin shel dvash. Those would be like containers of like pitchers of honey and sweet things, uke'arot tavshilin, and plates of cooked food. So Rabbi Yossi also got bulmus. Once they arrived at the city, he got bulmus, and the people of the city surrounded him and gave him all this, good stuff. They gave him sweet things to drink and food. So what did Rabbi Yehuda say to him? Amar le Rabbi Yehuda, And he keep go ahead.
I waylaid the shepherd, and you waylaid the entire city.
Yeah, or you forced, right? So I forced the roe waylaid. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if it's waylaid. It's the same thing as what we were saying, but okay. But in any event, so what is Rabbi Yehuda saying to Rabbi Yossi?
Basically saying, you've become the pot who called the kettle black. Like, I forced just one person, you forced an entire city. So who are you to,
But he didn't force, because the people of the city, it was their yozma.
Right, it was their initiative.
Initiative.
Yeah, so it makes you wonder exactly what we mean here again by kipachta, and if it's the same thing. So it wasn't with Rabbi Yossi, it doesn't seem to be by force. And also, so why did so many people bring him all this food and drink? It doesn't say why, but what would you imagine the reason why is?
he is an illustrious rabbi.
Yeah, because Rabbi Yossi was Rabbi Yossi, and these were famous Tanaim, and so they saw that he needed, and so they brought him all kinds of food and drink. So his act of kipeach was not the same, because however Rabbi Yehuda forced the row, or there are two ways of looking at it. Either kipeach meant, with Rabbi Yehuda, that he forced him physically. Could also mean maybe in the same way here. In other words, here we don't assume that Rabbi Yehuda held everybody up at gunpoint and that Rabbi Yossi held everybody at gunpoint and they all brought him food. We assume it's because people recognized that he was a great rabbi and he was in need, and so they brought him.
Or
So
they just wanted to honor him.
They wanted to help and honor him. So maybe that's also what happened with Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, maybe that's what kipeach actually means in this context. That is, the kipeach isn't that these people forced themselves physically, but they forced the circumstances for people to bring them food. However, the Mefarshim I looked at all understood that kipeach by Rabbi Yehuda meant does mean something like almost all of them. There was I can't remember, one of the Achronim said something like I just said now, that maybe kipeach was meant that he like forced the situation in such a way that the ro'eh gave him his bread. But so if it's true, if that I have two things in my head. So if that's true, so when Rabbi Yossi said to Rabbi Yehuda, kipachta et ro'eh, right, that you overcame the ro'eh, maybe we could understand that in a couple of ways. I think initially we understand it as being a kind of accusation. It's like, look what you did. On the other hand, Rabbi Yossi would know, just like Rabbi Yehuda, that if he didn't eat something, he was in danger of dying. So it raises a halachic question. Are you allowed to steal something if it's to save your own life? So actually, there's a diyun about this in halacha, and no, you're not allowed to. You're not, the Rambam paskins. You're not allowed to steal something. You know, even for a good cause like saving your life.
Are you allowed to steal to save somebody else's life?
No. Let's just stick to the text that we have here. So the question is, so what happened here? So it could be that this kipeach here really means that he forced it in such a way. He forced the situation in such a way that the Roeh, who might also have recognized Rabbi Yehuda, right? He was also a great rabbi. And he forced him in such a way that he realized that he had to give up his bread in order to save his life. And in a similar way, the people in the city did that for Rabbi Yossi, in which case, when Rabbi Yehuda says to him at the end, Ani kipachti et Torah v'ata kipachta et ha'ir kula, he's responding to Rabbi Yossi and say, as if to say, it could be like a compliment. In other words, I had one person respond to save my life and I got some bread, but you're very great. And all of these people responded to you to save your life, and they brought you all of this food. Anyway, it's an interesting story. I think there's, more to think about it, but I think we'll leave it for now. What we get from it, mostly from our story, is it's brought here apparently because we have two Rabbanim who are actually struck with pulmus, and this is what happened to them. How much we can derive from it halachically, I'm not sure, except to say that, you bring a story of Rabbanim, the Gemara often such stories to have Ma'aseh Rav, right? To show you what does a halachic authority, and that we should imitate. What did they actually do when they were confronted with this problem? And they lived at a time, when they couldn't just stop at the gas station and get something from the mini mart there. Right? They were out maybe in the beginning of the story. They're out maybe in the middle of nowhere, and they're desperate for food. And this is what Rabbi Yehuda did, and that's what Rabbi Yossi did when they got to the city, which apparently was their destination, or at least the destination along the way. Because the Gemara brought this story, it brings another story that includes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. And I just want to see if I can access this. All right, I don't want to waste my time. Too bad. All right, I can't access my document. So let's continue reading. We have another story here that actually isn't about Bulmus, but it's about the same characters along with Rabbi Meir, who were also on a trip, and what happened to them. So Michael Schwartz, the two
Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Havuka Azli Orcha. Rabbi Meir Hava Dayak Bishma, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi Lo Havo Deko Bishma, Kimatulahu Dukta, Ou Ushbiza, Yahavu Lahu, Amrulo Mashmech Shemach, Amar Lahu Kidor, Amar Shma Mina Adam Rashahu, Shena Amar Kidor Tapukot Hema, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Ashlimu Le, El Kisehu, Rabbi Meir Lo Ashlim Le Kiseha, Aslo Odvea Be Kivra Avo, It Chazi Le Bechilma, Ta Bashkel, Kisa V'Namanach Arisha, Dahu Gavra Lemachar, Amar Lahu Hechi It Kazili Bechilma, Amrile Chelma Debe Shimshe Late Bahu Mamsha, Azal Rabbi Meir V'Natzreya Hulo Yoma Ve'eteha.
Itay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Itay.
All right. That was a lot to read. So let's see how much we can put together. So this starts with two. Two means,
Furthermore,
furthermore, it's like shuv. It's like shuv in Hebrew. The shuv, like furthermore. So it's it's introducing another story with Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. But this time it also has Rabbi Meir. So what were they doing? Habuka Azli Ba'orcha. What were they doing?
so they were going on the way.
Okay. And Rabbi Meir Havadaik Bishma. Rabbi
So
Yehuda,
Rabbi,
Rabbi Yossi Lo Havadaiku Bishma.
oh, so Rabbi Meir was particular about names or name, and Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi were not particular about a name.
Right. So particular in the sense like the dayak to look carefully and in this case to look carefully and interpret a name. So Rabbi Meir had this practice that when he met somebody, he would ask their name and he would be medayek, he would use it to learn something about the nature of that person. So I want to just stop on that idea for a second. In other words, so, well, and so we see, right? So when they get to Kimat, I'll stop on it in a second. Let's read a little bit further. Kimatola hahu duchta.
So when they arrived to a particular place,
Right?
they asked about lodging, and they brought them.
Yahavu is they gave them.
They gave them.
Okay, so they needed right. Be'ol can either mean ask or want or need. So however you want to understand it uh, in this particular context, so it means that they needed a place to stay, Yahavule, and they gave to him. In other words, they probably could be they asked around and somebody found out, somebody directed them and whatever, they found a place that they could stay. They could find a place of lodging. And so when they got to this lodge or this inn, Amaru lo mashmach, which is just the Aramaic form of mashimcha, right? So what's your name? And the guy answered them, Kidor. Amar shma mina adam rashahu. What does that mean?
Myanmar.
Rabbi Meir,
Yeah, and how do you know it's Rabbi Meir?
because he was Dayak in names.
He was Dayak in name. So what did he say? Amar shma mina adam rashahu. What did he say?
He said we can learn from this that the innkeeper is a wicked person.
Because Shnemar Kidor Tapuchotema. What does that mean?
That the generation was overturned.
It's a generation of overturning. It's like a rebellious generation. This is from Ha'azinu, and it's from the Nevuah of Moshe of what will happen to Am Yisrael in the future. And Yoma, so because of the declining behavior of Bnei Israel in the future, Hashem is going to say, "Vayomer astira fanai mehem." I will hide my face from them. Ereh ma'achritam. I'll see what their end is. Kidor tapuchotema. Banim lo emun ba. This is a rebellious generation. They're children that I have no faith in. Let's see how they say, for they are a very perverse generation. Okay. Children in whom there is no faithfulness. So, right, so this name, Kidor, immediately sparks in Rebbe Meir this pasuk. Where do we know Kidor from? from ki dor, and what about this dor? Tapuchotema. So he makes this connection immediately that this must be a rasha. This must be a bad person. The name like Kidor. So I want to stop on that for a second. Why do you think, what would be the basis for Rebbe Meir saying that the name of a person would tell me something about them?
Maybe he had some special insight into these things. He could almost look into somebody deeper.
Well, that's yes, that's the result. But what do you think the basis for it is? Why should it be so that you could look at somebody and ask their name and then know something about them?
It doesn't sound right.
But I mean,
It's like saying that you are dressed that way, therefore you are a Ganaf or something like this.
So maybe so
it's completely circumstantial.
okay. So you're and it's what's the argument for saying it's completely circumstantial? Because that person didn't choose his name, right? Just and maybe right. So maybe it's happenstance. Michael Werner, what did you want to say?
I mean, we could also say that when a person's parents first name him, the parents have some insight into the character of the then child that nobody else has.
So that's also a possibility.
Meaning that the name is not arbitrary. The name, in fact, reflects an insight into the character.
So I think the way you put it now in the last statement, I will take that on its own. And it could be that, so the reason I want to stop on this concept for a moment is because actually the basic concept that names are meaningful is a theme that runs throughout Tanakh. Right? We know this from the very beginning that, Hashem creates man, he calls him Adam, and Adam is invited to name the animals, to give them names. And then, names become very important. Avram is named Avram by his father, and then Hashem renames him as Abraham, and so forth. Names are very meaningful, and perhaps the most meaningful actually is Shem Hashem, which I may be a little bit more conscious of as a Sofer Stam. But in general, this idea of the Shem Hashem is, it's a theme that runs throughout our davening and presumably also our own consciousness. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but when next time you daven, not just Shmona Esrei, but like the whole davening, pay attention to how we use this term, Shem Hashem. We have Kaddish, which is entirely about Shem Hashem. Yitkadal v'yikadash Shemei Rabbah, that the name of God should become great. Why do we say that Hashem becomes great? We say the name of Hashem becomes great. So there's the name. Go ahead, Michael. What do you want to say?
Presumably, our davening that God himself becomes great would be, just it's a bit like davening that water is wet.
No, I understand what you're saying, and you're right. And the point is, so we are most. I'm afraid to say it like this. I'll say it like this, and maybe I'll take it back. But perhaps our most direct relationship with Kadosh Baruch Hu, when we're davening, is through His name.
Yes, but Shem Hashem is the placeholder. You say that because you don't want to say the name itself, because it's
no, but we're taught. But that that's why we don't pronounce the name of Hashem, but we talk about the name of Hashem all the time. Ata kadosh, v'shimcha kadosh, u'kadoshim b'chol yom yahalalucha sela. You are holy. In other words, that's the essence of Hashem, who was itself holy. V'shimcha kadosh. Your name is holy. The
Maybe
point that
your name is your reputation, the way people know you.
you could say that shame just means, I'm not saying just, it's not right. Shame could mean reputation, but the reason it's a reputation is that's the name you're known by. So the point of what I'm saying is that as we go throughout Tanakh, both for even for animals as well as for people, and certainly for the Kadosh Baruch Hu, name is extremely significant. So it's not surprising that Rebbe Meir had this idea to be medayek b'shem, that the name is inherently meaningful. And if you'll say, okay, but now we're talking about some random guy who's running a Holiday Inn, and who knows how he got his name? His parents picked his name out of thin air, or maybe he was named for his grandfather. Who knows how? But if you believe that there's no such thing as coincidence, then you'll say, no, the name is going to always be significant. The name is a reflection of the person, just like Avram becomes Abraham, and Yaakov is a reflection, right? Ki achaz ba'akev achiv, and Yisrael ki sarita im elokim v'tuchal, im anashim v'tuchal. In other words, the name is significant, and not just names that the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave to people, but we have throughout Tanakh other names that are very significant. Go ahead, Michael.
That's of course at the end of the parsha before last, we have the we have the man who uses God's name blasphemously.
Yes, right. In other words, that saying, right, blaspheming God, using Hashem's name improperly, is a capital offense. It shows you how important the name of Hashem is. So the name is very. So all I'm pointing out is Rebbe Meir's idea. So you might think it's some kind of an arbitrary divination, chas v'shalom. Rebbe Meir may have looked at it more along these lines. He's saying names are always important, and whatever this person's name is. So you might say, okay, but like the guy didn't pick his name; his parents chose his name. But if you think that there's no such thing as a coincidence, which is something we learn out notably from Parshat Bechukotai, right? This is one of the main lessons of the Tochacha. Right? If you go with me bekeri, if you go with me as if things are happenstance, then I'll keep punishing you until you understand that this is not happenstance, it's what's happening to you. These are things that I, Hashem, am making happen. So we learn from Parshat Bechukotai that there is no such thing as a coincidence. This is a little bit of my own drasha, as you can understand, but this is how I see it. So Rebbe Meir had this sensitivity that you have to be careful with somebody's name. You have to be careful. As we'll see later in the story, he also won't claim it's 100%, but it's enough for you to be concerned or to be wary. So, right. So they asked this fellow's name, and he says Kidor. So Amar Shema mina Adam Rashahu Shema Kidor Tapuchotema. And as Michael Schwartz said, Amar, so we understand it's Rabbi Meir who must have said this. What's not clear at this point in the story is that apparently he said it to himself. He didn't say it out loud. And how do we know that? Because of the rest of the story. Because then what happened? So Rabbi Meir says this, but then what happened? Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi ashlinu le kisaihu. So what does that mean?
Rebbe Yehuda and Rebbe Yossi, they gave the innkeeper their wallets, their money purses.
Right. So ashlima, it's a turn of phrase that uh, they gave it over to him. Like the hashlim, right, means to complete. They're supposed to be complete, but I guess it means that they completed as like a transaction to give over their wallets, to give their purses to him, to the innkeeper. So they give them to Kidor. And Rabbi Meir lo ashlim like he's saying. What does that mean?
So Rebbe Meir did not give him his purse, did not give it to the innkeeper.
He didn't give it to the innkeeper. So why did Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi give their purses to the innkeeper at all? Like, why would they have given them? I mentioned last week.
I mean, for safekeeping.
For safekeeping, but why particularly now, and why did Rabbi Meir not do it?
It was Erev Shabbat. They gave it to him to keep for Shabbat.
Right, so apparently it's Erev Shabbat, which is implied again a little bit later on in the story, but this is the first implication. In other words, everybody has to do something with their purses, with their money. So Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, who were traveling companions from the previous story, they entrust their purses to the innkeeper. Rabbi Meir doesn't. And what does he do? Azal otve be kivre de avua.
He went. He sat on the grave of his father. But last week you said it was the innkeeper's father.
Yeah, and otve would mean hoshivoto, right? So either hoshi, in other words, he made himself sit, or he put the purse. I think it means he put the purse on the grave of Avua, of his father, and the his means the father of the innkeeper. Again, this becomes clear from what happens in the story, that that's what he did. Okay, Paul, why don't you continue reading? Chazile.
They didn't have a safe with the number.
Well, giving to the innkeeper.
Number combination.
No, but, they didn't. I didn't think they had combination locks right then, but they had locked safes. I mean, the idea existed from even much earlier. But okay, but go ahead and read. Itchaze le.
Itchaze le bechel mei ta shekel kisa demanach areisha dehahu gavra limchar.
The gavra is the end of the sentence. Limchar
amar lehu achi itchaze li bechel mai amri le chelma devei shimshei let behu mamasha azal Rabbi Meir v'natrei ulei Yoma v'ayte.
Okay.
I feel I'm back when I was a child in Luxembourg. I was reading the Tefillah and didn't understand anything.
So this opens us up to new possibilities of learning, and we should always learn like as if we're children. There's a story that I heard more than once from Talmidim of Rav Soloveitchik that one time he started a new Zman and they were learning a Masechet. It was a Masechet that they had learned a few years before. And he started off, and many of his students took very careful notes on what the Rav said. And he started off the shir, and they're going through the beginning of whatever Masechet it was, going through the sugya, and Rav Soloveitchik is developing the shir, and he ends up with a certain pshat. So one of the students says to him, but the last time we learned this, the Rav said this pshat, like a different pshat. And Rav Soloveitchik looked at him like he didn't know what he was talking about. He said, no, so that's what I said then. This is what I'm saying now. In other words, every time Rav Soloveitchik sat down to learn a Masechet, he learned it like it was new, as if it's kilo the first time. You always have to be open to this idea. That's the basis of, it's the basis for all of us learning. So with that, we can all improve our Aramaic skills. So, Yitchazi le bechelmei. So it appeared to him bechelmei.
בחלום שלו.
Yafeh. Bechalomo. It appeared to him, right? So this word Yitchazi, we know Chazi means, it's like Ra'ah, like Nitra'eh. Lo bechelmo. That what? Tashkel kisa demanach aresha dahahu gavra. So what is ta? Like tashema, right? The Gemara says often tashma. What does ta mean?
That's something.
Michael Schwartz?
Come.
Come, just means come. Bo. Shkel.
Shkol.
Shkel, it's similar to in Hebrew. So in Hebrew, right, lishkol would mean to weigh. But shkal in Aramaic means to take. Come and take kisa. So kisa we know is kis, right? Come and take the purse. The manach aresha, the hahu gavra. That's what does that mean? The manach, like the munach, right? Come and take the purse that's placed aresha. What's resha mean?
Beginning.
Beginning, or why does it mean beginning? What's the basic meaning?
Rosh.
Rosh. Here it literally means Rosh. The a prefix in Aramaic means what? Anybody?
Two.
Al. It means on. Okay? So tashkel kisa de manach aresha dehahu gavra. Come and take the purse that's placed on the head or at the head of that particular person. So who's the particular person? And who's having the dream? So Michael Schwartz, you remember from last week, who's having the dream?
I thought it was the innkeeper was having the dream
Yeah.
and referring to his father's grave.
Yes. So that's, and again, this becomes clear because of the context, but that's what it means. So this innkeeper saw in his dream in the dream, we told him, come and take the purse that's placed at the head of that person, meaning your father, right? In other words, he knew who Gabra was. So he had a dream that there's a purse of money at his father's grave, at the head of his father's grave. So he had this funny dream. So Limchar, the next morning, the next day, Amar lahu, he said to them, Achi itchazi li bechel mai. What did he say to them? Achi.
This, he's telling the story. This appeared to me in the dream.
Yeah, so Hachi means kach in Hebrew. Right? Thus I saw in my dream. In other words, he tells over his dream to, and who? So it's the innkeeper who had the dream. Who is he telling the dream to?
To the rabbis. No?
Telling to the rabbis. They're his guests. He's telling me I had this dream that that there's a purse of money at the head of my father's grave. So what do they say to him? Amri le. They say to him, Chelma devei shimshei leit behu mamasha. What does that mean?
First word is dream.
What did you say?
Well, first word would be dream, your dream, maybe.
I'm not getting the first word you're saying.
Dream.
Dream I got. What did you say besides that?
That's all.
Oh, that's but what did they say? Chelma devei shimshei leit behu mamasha. The dream of Bei Shimshei. What's Bei Shimshei? Does it sound like any other phrase you're familiar with, Bei Shimshei?
Shamesh or Shemesh.
Well, Shemesh, yeah. Sounds like Ben Hashmashot. What's Ben Hashmashot?
Between the Shkia and the Tzeta Kochavim.
Yeah, so it's the evening, it's dusk. And when do we talk about Ben Hashmashot?
On Shabbat.
It could be any. It could be any day, but we talk about it mainly on erev Shabbat. I think that's what it is. Rashi here says, "Beishim sheshel arvei Shabbatot."
I have a granddaughter who was born a month ago.
Yes. Ben Hashmashot. What on erev Shabbat?
No.
Oh, Stam Ben Hashmashot.
Erev Rosh Chodesh.
Nachon. It was a month ago. Yeah, right. So it was a girl, so you didn't have to worry about when the brit would be. Right?
Yes. Nevertheless, I asked the rabbi, and he says, "What to know when is her Yom Huledet?" And he said the next day.
The next day. The next day. Yeah, right. Right, because you still want to know the birthday.
The day after the Tzeta Kochavim.
Yeah, fair. Okay. So yeah, right. Avazolo muvan me'elav, right? So I mean,
we didn't know. We asked the
right.
rabbi.
No, it was a good question. It was a good question. In any event, so the rabbis dismiss the dream. They say, Amri le'chelma devei shimshei leit behu mamasha. The dream that you have on erev Shabbat, leit behu mamasha. What does that mean?
There isn't like substance or reality.
Yeah. There's no substance to it. In other words, it's not serious dream. And we know from other places in the Gemara that the rabbis generally took dreams pretty seriously, right? There's a whole sugya in Masechet Brachot about dream interpretation, and that's not the only place, but that's where it goes into a lot of specifics. And they say, no, okay, but the dream of Ben Hashmashot, let's put mamash. It's not a dream to take seriously. Azal Rabbi Meir v'natre kule Yoma v'aitie. So what did Rabbi Meir do? Azal Rabbi Meir. What does Azal mean?
He went.
He went. V'natre. What's natre?
And he guarded.
He guarded. Natar in Aramaic, Nator, it means to guard. It's the cognate of Nitzor, like Nitzor Lashon Chameira, Nitzar. The tet and the tzadi are interchanged. And of course, you all know about the Nature Karta. What does Nature Karta mean?
Guardians of the city.
Guardians of the city, right? So Natre, Rabbi Meir went and he guarded it, Natar Oto, Natre. He guarded it the entire day. Va'aitie. What's va'aitie?
You mean he did it on Shabbat? If it's what it was
What?
Erev Shabbat.
No, so now it's Shabbat. In other words, so we know the chronology. The rabbis came to the inn. It was Erev Shabbat. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi give their money to the innkeeper.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently before Shabbat, Rabbi Meir went and placed his money at the head of this grave.
Yes.
I probably dug a little hole next to the gravestone or something like that. And then he came back. And then in the next morning, they're up. Maybe they're having a little breakfast. And the innkeeper says, "Look, I had this funny dream that there's a purse of money at the head of my father's grave." So the rabbis dismiss it. So which rabbis dismiss it?
Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda.
Yeah, because no, they say, well, whatever. But Rabbi Meir, what did he do?
He took it seriously.
He took it seriously. So he went and he sat next to his purse the whole day. Va'aite means and he brought it. In other words, it would be at the end of Shabbos. He brought it back. That's all it means. So yeah, so that's Rabbi Meir. That's what he did. Okay, Michael Werner, Limchar.
Limchar amru lo havlan kisan amar lehu lo hayu devarim me'olam. Amar lehu Rabbi Meir amayla dakitu mishma amar le amay la amart lan mar ma amar lehu emar de amari ana heshasha ach zoke mi emachi.
Okay, so that's a lot of difficult words. So, but some of them we'll figure out, right? So limchar. So do what you can. Limchar. What does that mean?
The next day, presumably, yes.
Next day. Amaru lo.
They said to him.
So who said to whom?
I'm guessing it's your Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi said to Rabbi Meir.
Well, we'll see. What did they say? Havan kisan. What does that mean?
Havlan. Oh wait, no, they were speaking to the innkeeper.
Speaking of the innkeeper, what do they say to the innkeeper?
Give us our purses.
Yeah, have, like Yahav, we said right before, it means to give. So they're saying it's the imperative. Give us, like ten lanu kisenu, give us our purses. Amar lahu. So what did he say to them?
You
Lo hayu dvarim me'olam. What does that mean?
there were not there, there never was any such thing.
Yeah, there that right. There these things never were. They never happened. In other words, I didn't know what you're like. We would say, I didn't know what you're talking about. I didn't know about any purses. Amar lahu Rebbe Meir. So Rebbe Meir said to them. Who did Rebbe Meir say to?
He was presumably speaking to Rabbi Yosei and Rabbi Yehuda.
And so what did he say to them? Amai lo daikitu bishma. What did he say to them? Amai, Michael, anybody. Amai,
Why?
why? Lo daikitu.
Why didn't you? Yeah, why didn't you be careful?
Yeah, why weren't you careful, or why weren't you particular? Like, why weren't you carefully analyzing bishma?
The name of the
Oh, yeah. Why weren't you paying attention to the name?
The name, right? Why weren't you careful about the name? He's asking, you could understand this in different tones of voice, but Rebbe Meir's, it's also somewhat, I see it as being somewhat accusatory, like, you fools, why weren't you careful? Why, we knew his name. Why weren't you careful? And to understand his name indicated that he was not to be trusted. So what did they say to him? Amaru le, they said to him, Amailo amart lan mar.
Why didn't you say anything to us?
Right. Why didn't you, right? Amailo amart lan mar. Why didn't Master, in other words, why didn't his honor say something to us? Amar lehu, Amar da amari ana chashasha, achzoki mi amari. It's a little trickier, but see if we can get through it. Amar, one would, I'm going to push this along. Okay.
One would say,
One would say, Amar de Amari. I would say, the Amari Ana, that Amar, let's say that I would say Chashasha. What's Chashasha?
suspect.
Right. So I could say that suspicion. I could say that there's a suspicion about a name. Achzoke mi Amari.
Would you have almost believed my suspicion? Would you've held on to my suspicion?
Well, no, Alma, right? So Achzoke, right, from like lahachzik. In other words, to give it a chazaka, to give it to say that I know for certain that it's something that's muhzak, something that is would be strongly held. Mi amari, do I say? Or in other words, does one say? Mi means ha'im omrim. Like would I say something? Is that strong? So in other words, so what's the exchange? Rabbi Meir, right, the innkeeper all of a sudden doesn't know anything about their money. And so Rabbi Meir says, "What, why weren't you careful about his name?" And they said, "Well, why didn't you say something to us?" In other words, now they understood that he was careful. So we see at this part of the story that when it's said earlier in the story, just so we put this together, right? When it said earlier that Rabbi Meir havadaik bishma, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef lo havu daiku bishma. Right, so that introduces their relative positions about being medayek b'shem. And then when they hear the name, Amar, hear the name, he says the name is Kidor. Amar, Shma mina Adam Rashahu. So we said this must be Rabbi Meir talking. That it tells us that he's an evil man because Kidor, I understand, is like Kidor Tapuchotema. So what we understand is, now we understand that when it says that Rabbi Meir said that, he said it to himself. It's not like he said, yeah, obviously he wouldn't have burst out in front of the innkeeper and say, "Oh, you're a Russia," right? But he didn't even say it to his compatriots. He just said, he said to himself, "Oh, I see, this guy is not to be trusted." And so now that something bad happened, they have this little exchange between them. And Rabbi Meir says, "Look, why weren't you careful with the name?" Meaning, like I was. And they say, "Well, you could have told us. Why didn't you tell us?" So his reply is, "Look, Ema da Amariana Chashasha Avzuki mi Amari." So, okay, I'm willing to say that one should be suspicious, but I wouldn't say that it's absolute. So what's he say? What does he mean by that? How does that answer Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi? What's he saying to them? Why didn't he tell them?
Because he couldn't be sure.
He couldn't be sure. Do you think that's a good answer?
No, no, not really, because he was sure enough to go do something else with his money.
It seems to be kind of a weak answer, right? I mean, the whole exchange is a little weird. I think it shows you that even great Tanaim had their weaknesses. But yeah, I think it's kind of a funny answer. He says, "Okay, so in other words, the next question could be, okay, why didn't you tell us your suspicions and let us decide?" But I think because of the way Rabbi Meir asks them, and you can put a different intonation on their questions and the way they ask them. When he says, "Amailo daikitu bishma," it couldn't be that he's like saying, like, "Why didn't you do this?" He could have been saying, you know, didn't it occur to you that maybe, in other words, it may not be so accusatory, but he's wondering why they didn't do anything. Um, the whole thing is, but look, Rabbi Meir was there, presumably, although I want to give Rabbi Meir the benefit of the doubt here, and we don't know, right? There's a lot of information that's missing. So at the moment that they find out his name is Kidor, so we know that Rabbi Meir thinks, "I can't trust this guy," and maybe he just leaves. And he doesn't really know what happens to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. Maybe he thinks that they think the same thing, and that they're going to find their own hiding places for their money. That could be. And it's only now, the next day, when the innkeeper doesn't give them back their money, that he realizes that they didn't protect themselves. And so he says, why didn't you, why weren't you hip to the fact that he had an evil name? That you should have been careful. And they say, why didn't you say anything to us? Like, we didn't think about that.
But
And he says,
also,
so
it's
he,
also
so he says,
clear-
I didn't tell you because it was my personal suspicion. I thought maybe you'd be suspicious too, but I didn't feel it was my place to tell you that this is something that you have to do because it's not certain. In other words, the whole discussion about name and the significance of name, he says, look, that I think it's worth being careful about, but I can't claim that it's 100%, it's going to work 100% of the time. Michael Werner, what do you want to say?
only that I mean, not only do Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda not take names seriously, they don't take dreams seriously either. So, I mean,
Well, no, they don't take this particular dream because it was Chelma de Beishim Sheh. But nonetheless, what did you want to say about that?
not only that. Okay, so they don't take this particular dream serious, but in any event, they're not. They're Rabbi Meir seems to give an authority to signs that they don't.
Yes, yeah, and that is worth pointing out. Yes, that.
Yes, and it may be that he would not, the Rabbi Meir would not give the same authority to hearsay.
Yes.
Or you can find it objectionable. I mean, it's,
yeah. So, but you're right. Rabbi Meir is the one who seems to be most careful because he's careful with the name, and he hears the dream, and he doesn't dismiss the dream. He doesn't think it's crazy.
Why does the innkeeper tell his dream? If he is really like it turns out he is, he should have checked without telling them if there is a person near the grave of his father.
Wait, say that. I'm not sure I understood what you're saying. Who should have checked it?
the innkeeper.
The innkeeper. Why did he tell his dream?
Yeah. So what do you think? Why did he tell his dream?
So the first thing he should have done is to check if there is a person near the grave without telling the dream.
Okay, so that was his mistake. You're right, but he woke up.
1/3 mistake. Two.
Yeah, but yesh lomar, right? Because look, he also thought maybe it's just a dream. Why does he share it? Look at that. He got up in the morning. He said, I had this funny dream that there's like a pile of money in my father's grave. Say, lech teda. What kind of a dream is that? But as Michael Werner points out, but Rabbi Meir is, he's hip to all these things, and he's listening and saying, "Listen, this guy may not simple, right? There really is a purse of money at his father's grave." So he goes and he watches it all day. Okay, but now Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi are in a bind because they need to leave, and the innkeeper's holding his money, and they don't have any way of proving that he has their money. Presumably, they didn't take a receipt, right? You learn from here that you always get a receipt. So what do? Paul, wait, who read? Michael. Okay, Paul, why don't you read a little bit? Mashkuhu.
Mashkuhu v'ayiluhu l'chanuta chazor telafchei aspamei azalu vihavu simana lidveitehu v'shakluhu לחיסאיו והייתו אזל איהו וקטלי לאיתתי.
Okay, because it's late, I'm just going to go through this, and we're not going to have time to go through all the Rashis. But the shot that I'm giving you is based on Rashi. So mashchu, they pulled him, vailu v'hichniso to lechanut. They said, "Come on, let's go to the chanut," and we understand this chanut, right? Normally just translated as a store, but this is a place where they went to get a drink. They like it's whatever. It's Sunday morning. They say, "Okay, let's whatever. Let's go get a drink." Hazu tlafche asfame. So when they're drinking, this guy's a little bit drunk, and they see that he has lentils stuck to his mustache, right? Safam. There's some lentils on his mustache. So they take this information, Azalu, they go, meaning Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi go, V'yahavu simana l'dveitu. They give this sign to his wife, to the innkeeper's wife, meaning they went to the wife and they said, "You know, we were with your husband this morning and having a drink, and he told us to come and get our money. And, you know, in case she would be suspicious that he didn't really say such a thing, and they testify, you know, yeah, we were with your husband, you know, you gave him lentils for breakfast this morning. We saw, you know, they don't say we saw lentils on his on his uh on his mustache. They just say he told us to give you this sign, like, to make sure that you know that we're telling the truth. He had that he ate lentils for breakfast. So bishaklu v'chisayim. So she takes and gives them their purses, vaitu, right? And they go. Azal ihu v'katle le'itze. Then this one goes and kills his wife, right? So the innkeeper comes back and he finds out that the wife gave the money back to their rightful owners and he kills her, which is not a very nice ending to the story. Hainu, it should be Titania, and this is what we learn in a Braita, Maim Rishonim Hechilu B'sar Chazir, Maim Achronim Hargu et Nefesh. So there's a Braita that alludes to this story, and it just means that Mayim Rishonim. So what's Mayim Rishonim? What's Mayim Rishonim? You all, if you know what Mayim Achronim is, you know what Mayim Rishonim is.
Netilat Yadayim.
Hand washing before the meal.
Yes, Netilat Yadayim. So the water that you wash before the meal, right? Mayim Rishonim Hechilu Basar Chazir. It made somebody feed somebody pork. And Mayim Achronim led to somebody killing somebody. So the Mayim Achronim, we understand, led to somebody killing something. That's our story. That's the story of this innkeeper who didn't wash himself at the end of the meal. And because he didn't wash himself at the end of the meal, it ended up with the death of somebody. It brought about somebody's death. And how did Mayim Rishonim lead to somebody eating pork or being fed pork? So Rashi brings the story. This is also a sugya in Masechet Chulin, where this story is also alluded to. So Pundak Yisrael Hayam Mocher Yisrael Dvarim Mutarim. So there was a Jewish innkeeper that would sell to Jewish people things that were like kosher food, things that were permitted to eat. Uma'achilam, and he would feed them. He would sell them kosher things, and he would feed them kosher things. And if non-Jews came in to his inn, he would give them cooked pork. So one time, this Jew came to the innkeeper. The innkeeper saw that this guy didn't wash before he ate. right? So this guy didn't wash when he was sitting down to eat. So he gave him basar chazir. He thought he was a goy.
Mm.
And that's how not washing mayim rishonim, not doing netilat yadayim, led to him eating treif. And mayim achronim arguat nefesh, zohi yishto shel zeh. This is the wife of this one, of our innkeeper. She'ilu natal mayim achronim derech hanotlim yadayim mekanech et tzvamam biyadayim tovchot. If he had done mayim achronim and washed his hands at the end of the meal, and it is the way of people when they're washing themselves at the end of the meal to wipe the food off with their wet fingers from their mustache. And then the lentils wouldn't have been apparent, and then Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't have had a siman to give to the wife, and the wife wouldn't have been killed. Anyway, we'll stop here. It's a good place to stop. There's another short story after this, which we'll do, and there's several agadatot. So, with your permission, well, it's not a huge amount of agadat, but the next shiur or two, I'm not sure how long it'll take. I think we should go through these agadot. I think these agadot are worth looking at. Anyway, you can think about what we learned from this. But Michael Werner, what did you want to say?
So I don't really understand at all how this connects to what we were learning before. I mean,
so how did it connect to begin with?
I mean, we're talking bulmus.
We were talking about bulmus. So why did we bring this story? I said it at the beginning of the story.
It's the same people.
It's the same people. It's Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, and it's another story about them that happened to them when they were traveling. So that's enough in terms of the Gemara's flow. That's enough of a connection for the Gemara to bring the story here.
So sort of free association.
It's a free association within certain limits. There are times when the Gemara will bring, ma'amarim, not just stories, also ma'amarei halacha, that are said by the same Rav, even if they're not from the same topic that we're on. But the Baal HaGemara will say, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, and then that's what he said about this. And while we're talking about that, I'll tell you three other things that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, even if they're not immediately connected. Sometimes they're broadly connected, and sometimes they're not really connected, except that it was said by the same person. And here, in a similar way, we're talking about Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, and what happened to them when they're traveling. And this is another story that happened to them while they're traveling. But the only other thing I'll say is, even though they didn't have bulmus, it is a story that involved food in some roundabout way. So you can consider for yourself. You can, between now and next week, if you think there's a deeper connection. I'm not against the idea that there could be deeper connections here. But I think that's enough for us today, unless anybody has any last words. Okay. So wish everybody a Shabbat Chodesh Tov, Shabbat Shalom, and Chag Sameach.
Thank you. Good night. Chag Sameach. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shakur.
Yeah.